What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today what we're going to do is we're going to define some attributes, okay? So things like grit, drive, game drive, prey drive, that whole thing. All these words that we use to describe coonhounds, we are going to go ahead and break it down in this video. Y'all stay tuned. Roll intro. Before we get into the video, shout out to Cody, man. You won the leash. I'm going to be shipping it out to you tomorrow. And anybody who's bought one, it should be shipped out tomorrow. I shipped a couple out a while back here. They should be getting there to you around today sometime or over the weekend. Let me know if you guys get them, right? So let's go ahead and talk about this video, man. So defining these attributes, right? So we have all these words used to describe coon dogs, and sometimes we know what they mean, sometimes we have a good idea of what they mean, but I'm going to go ahead and give you all my personal definitions about these. They're probably pretty much on par with a lot of guys. Sometimes we have a little bit of a lingo barrier where this word is used in this state and this word is used in this state or this area, whatever, etc. So I'm going to break it down for y'all here, and let me know if you guys agree with me. Let me know if you guys know something different than I do, right? Or if you know it to be different. Okay, so the first one on the list we're going to do, I made a big list, is grit. Okay, so grit is one of those huge ones. We hear it everywhere. We hear it all the time. And we might have a good understanding. Might have a pretty good idea about it. But to me, specifically, grit is the reaction to aggression, right? So if we have a coon and it aggresses a dog, and the dog's reaction is to bay, boo, boo, and start barking, versus when a coon aggresses a dog and the dog wants to get in there and shred it and eat it up, right? Those are two different levels of grit, right? So the second one is going to be a more gritty dog, right? And the more explosive, the more bigger reaction in this manner is getting back in there is going to be the more gritty that the dog is. Okay, so that is going to be grit defined in a nutshell. Let me know if y'all agree with that one. All right, so let's talk about drive. Okay, so I have drive onto its own, not to be confused or mixed with game drive or prey drive. We're going to get to all these, but drive, I can only explain it as a dog's willingness and focus to go, right? That's all it is. It doesn't go any farther than that. We can walk a dog in the woods or walk a dog on a leash, and it's kind of like skirting around us, not walking in a straight line, not paying attention where it's going. We cut it off, it gets out there, kind of mills around and goes slow. That dog has a low drive versus a dog that has a high drive. You put it on the leash, it's trying to pull you to the woods, you cut it off, it's gone, and that's it, right? It's hung up. You hung it up. The dog's gone. It knows that it wants to get out there and it wants to move. That is a high drive dog. And usually, I'm not going to spoil the rest of these on the list, but usually it's coupled with a lot of other one of these traits, right? So drive is on its own, but it usually is coupled with a couple more of these things, right? Okay, so the next one here I want to talk about is game drive. Okay, so game drive is different than drive, and game drive is also different than prey drive. Okay, so game drive is your willingness to go look for something. How focused are you on looking for something, right? Looking for game out there. And we can have a high, low drive dog with high game drive, right? So a dog get out there and mill around, mess around a lot. Then when it finds something, then it's ready to go. It's ripping 100 miles an hour. A lot of new dogs will be this way. A lot of green dogs will be this way. A lot of pups or younger dogs will be this way. They'll have a low drive and a high game drive. But growing the game drive will increase your drive, and then that's how they shape up and mature and all these things. Okay, and it's also, it's not predicated on one animal, right? So game in general, right? So we've all had it happen here or there, or we know somebody that had it happen. They get into something they're supposed to, they bump something they're not supposed to, and a dog with a lot of game drive, this will happen to you, right? So prey drive is going to be the same as game drive, except for it is very, very specific on exactly what prey it is that is going out there to look for, right? This dog has a high prey drive for coon specifically. So when we cut it off, we know what's in that dog's head, and we have a high drive dog, we have a high prey drive dog, we're going to have a pretty good time in the woods. Dog's going to get out there. He's going to be focused on the hunt all the time. He's going to be focused on looking for coons all the time. He's going to be moving good. He's going to be moving fast. And he's going to be doing what he's supposed to do out there with no qualms about it. So a high prey drive dog or a high game drive dog is what's going to look good in the woods, is what I'm trying to tell y'all, right? So that combo is going to look good in the woods. And we can have any combo of that, right? We have a high drive dog with low game drive or low prey drive, and that's going to be the dog that constantly quits them, constantly finds something else to do, whatever. But they look good in the start, and then once they find it, they're like, I don't really care too much. They have a low game drive or a low prey drive. So let's talk about gameness, okay? So gameness is, everybody knows what gameness is. If you've been around, you know anything about other dog breeds, pit bulls specifically, gameness is just a sure willingness to get into altercations and not quit, right? They don't have any quit in them. They're not going to quit. They are very game to fight. So gameness is the level of game that they are, right? So the dog can be very game to get an altercation, but it doesn't have a high level of gameness to keep it on through the wherewithal. So a high gameness is what is going to cause things like killing coons on the ground, and things like that, right? So fighting with things that they probably really shouldn't be fighting with, and even after they get hurt, continue on fighting, right? So gameness is one of them traits that are absolutely, without a doubt, in coonhounds. And I've said this on the channel before, coonhounds are the only other breed that I have seen it in at the same level as pit bulls, gameness, right? We have a lot of these other breeds of dogs, these smaller breeds of dogs like yags and things like that. They tend to be very gritty dogs, right? They tend to be very gritty. I don't know so much about their gameness level, right? But they're extremely gritty dogs. But the gameness is something that you find in coonhounds also, just like you find it in pit bulls, right? So let's talk about a gamey dog. Okay, so a gamey dog is a little bit different than a game dog or the gameness, right? So the gamey dog is going to be a dog that is kind of like prone to just bumping everything, right? So it can't resist itself. If it knows it's there, it's going to get it, right? So that is going to be a gamey dog. And a lot of times, a lot of these coon dogs are very gamey, right? Because they don't like I say on the channel a lot, they don't quite have an idea that they want a coon yet, but they do have a lot of prey drive, but it's still in like the game stage, a game drive stage, or like a gamey stage. So they tend to bump stuff a lot, right? So we can have that happen to us quite a lot with a gamey dog. And that can also be the dog's willingness to get into altercations with just about anything, but it's not saying that it's going to sit there and fight it all night. It's saying they might get in a little altercation and then they back off. And we see it all the time. We see it in all the videos that we see. The dog get in there, fight it a little bit, and then back off. Then get back in there and fight a little bit, and then back off. A dog that is very game and with a high gameness will get in there and it won't get out, right? It will not back off. It will not get out. It don't care if it's getting chewed up. It don't care if it's getting tore up. High gameness is a lot different than gamey, and gamey also falls into the category of it's going to bump a lot of stuff, right? So let's talk about this one. This is a very big, huge, important one that I've talked about on the channel multitudes of times, and that is intensity. And we all know what intensity means, but let's go ahead and apply this to coonhounds, okay? So low intensity dog is going to be a dog that's woo, woo, woo. Don't want to bark much. Don't want to have a lot of drive. Not trying to move hard. Not trying to move fast. Not trying to get there, get it done, and just have a lot of intensity behind its intentions. Versus a dog that is, on the cage, chewing the cage up, trying to bust the cage open, trying to climb up in the trees, trying to just go and give it its all on every level. That is a high intensity dog. So high intensity dogs are going to be awesome. Like, I love high intensity dogs. I don't mind low intensity dogs, and just because they're low intensity don't mean that they're any worse than a high intensity dogs. But high intensity dogs can get you in trouble sometimes. But high intensity dogs are very, very fun to have, very, very fun to hunt, and very, very fun to watch tree and do their business. High intensity dogs and we can get dogs that are low intensity to get to a high intense level by amping them up, and that's what I talk about on the channel a lot. Okay, so the next one here that I want to talk about and break down for you guys is people smart. Okay, so people smart is kind of what I call it, but the actual term for this is called aloofness, right? So if a dog is aloof, it will not care about you, right? So it's fine off by itself. It is fine not worrying about what you got going on. You're not dictating your presence, or your whatever you got going on isn't really dictating what that dog has going on. But a people smart dog, it's all about you. And the best way that I can explain this is, for the most part, from what I've seen, is working breeds of dogs tend to be aloof, and they need that aloofness to be able to get out there and operate without you or without your supervision. So aloofness is a huge one here, right? A dog that is extremely aloof can be problematic, but for the most part, we have a huge range, and we can get a dog that is pretty aloof, right? And the people smartness is the range too. Like they're very people oriented dogs. They're constantly looking at you for instruction. They're constantly needing you there to back them up. A people smart dog can be extremely problematic, especially in the hunting scenario, right? So we have the people smart and aloofness, but that's just what it is called, is aloofness. And a dog can be very aloof or not, the opposite, right? So the next one that I want to talk about here is mouthy and tight-lipped. I think we all kind of get the idea behind this one, and that is going to be the dog barks a lot for no, like it'll bark for nothing, versus you can't hardly get it to bark. A tight-lipped dog will hardly bark, and a mouthy dog will bark a lot. Now, mouthy could also be used as the dog's willingness to put its mouth on something, right? So the dog can be really mouthy, wanting to mouth things, but mouthiness is going to be the willingness to bark a lot, and just it's kind of free carrying with its bark. It barks a lot. If it's too much, we call it babbling, right? Or tight-lipped. They don't want to bark, and they want to bark. Mouthy, tight-lipped. Okay, so I feel like I've talked about each of these on the channel here before. So this is what I've kind of put together a list of. If I wanted to take these attributes and I wanted to put it into a perspective and go, this is the dog that I would like to look for. First off, I would like a dog with a very high drive. I would like a dog with a very high prey drive. I would like a dog that has a lot of grit, and I mean a lot of grit. I love gritty dogs, right? And just because they're gritty don't mean that they're game or they're gameness, right? So I like a dog with a lot of grit, and I also like a dog to be game. Okay, so I want a dog to be game, maybe not to the death or not to a detrimental point, but there is a good chunk of gameness that I like to have in my dogs. And I would like to know that if my dog met something on the ground, my dog's walking out of there if it come down to it. But I also want to know that if my dog met something on the ground, it's going to let it go on about its business enough to get put up a tree, right? So that's when we talk about the gameness playing a role in killing stuff on the ground and things like that. So intensity here, okay? So intensity, I already told y'all to me, I love high intensity dogs. So if you get me a high drive, high prey drive dog with extreme amounts of grit, with about a medium game level, gameness level, and a very high intensity dog that is aloof to not a detrimental degree, but aloof to where it's still handleable, and aloof to where you can still instruct that dog. And then it is also slightly tight-lipped and slightly tight-lipped on the ground, and extremely mouthy on the tree. And then also, I'll throw the last one in here, the tree-minded versus trail-minded dogs. I made that whole video. You guys can check that one out. I've already explained these two, but I would also like to have a dog that is slightly tree-minded over track-minded. Not to say that I don't really care those two, right? They just have to be complementary of each other. So if I had to pick all these attributes that we just defined and describe the dog that I like and the dog that I want and the dog that I train for, and you guys now have the definitions, you guys should be able to have a very good idea of what the things that your dog should be doing if we're trying to train for that, right? So that is a lot of boxes to check on one dog. And just to be honest with you and just to be completely fair about it, I don't think that I have ever had a dog that checked every single one of those boxes. I've had dogs that came close, but they did not check every single box on that list. So don't set that as a super high expectation, or like if it don't meet these expectations, it's not a good dog, because that right there would be a top notch. Nobody better can beat that dog. That would be my dog of choice, right? So we have a lot of leeway there, and we have a lot of ability there. So, and the intensity on that, I say like a high intensity dog, I mean that intensity goes through every single one of those traits. It's not just intensity, intense on one thing. A very high intensity dog across the board is going to make a good dog for me. I like high intensity dogs, but I like high intensity dogs that are handleable, right? We can have dogs that are so high intensity that we can't handle them. So there is drawbacks to every single one of these things, even though a lot of them are very good and exactly what we need to do coon hunting. But with that, y'all keep them treed, and thanks for tuning in, man.